Okay, but we are continuing forward with Revelation chapter 14 tonight, and so we'll start in there. Why don't we start with a word of prayer, as we need greatly help to understand continually in this. Heavenly Father, God, we love you. We praise your name today. God, you are good. Your mercies are new every morning. You are faithful. God, your faithfulness is great, and we thank you and praise you for who you are. We thank you for your word, for the book of Revelation, and just pray, God, that your Spirit would help us as we study and work our way through, as you would give us understanding and wisdom and insight. That God, you enjoy in the journey of studying your word together, and you would be glorified in it as well. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, Revelation 14, which has really a lot of, I gotta slide my standing on. I don't even know either. Revelation 14 has a number of different pictures for us, kind of like 4 or 5 different sort of sections and pictures. Again, this is midpoint tribulation still in our timeline. It hasn't really advanced over the last couple of chapters. We've kind of hung in limbo right at the middle of tribulation of where we're at. Though there is some movement and things, there's further explanation that's going on with chapter 11, verse 15, which really hits the midpoint of the tribulation. From there to all the way really through chapter 14 here even, it's just leading us into the bowl judgments and explaining the situation in heaven and on earth and with God and with heavenly beings and with the saints and humanity on earth. And so there's a whole bunch of that. I would say it's just a broader picture of everything that's happening at this time. Is kind of how to look at this. So we're going to look tonight at the Lamb and the 144,000, 3 angels and their messages, some assurance again for the saints. I love how this is really just woven now through this period within the tribulation. Assurance for the saints, reaping of the earth's harvest and the reaping of the grapes of wrath. And the grapes of wrath is not just a book. It's a description amongst the book of Revelation of God's judgment. And maybe you ever read the book, The Grapes of Wrath?
Seen the movie.
Seen the movie? I don't think I have. It's
Henry Fonda, black and white, isn't it? Black and white?
Is it black and white?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's not black and white, it seems like it is during the movie, right?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm not missing much. But that's kind of what we're going to go through. So we're going to look starting, this is leading us to the next picture, but starting in verses 1 through 5. Sort of this first picture is the Lamb and the 144,000. So we'll kind of look at a picture, read the verses, try to understand and explain the verses, and then move into the next picture as we work our way through kind of notes and things. I got to get my notes in the right place myself. What I kind of just as studying and working through, one of the things that jumped out again is, and I don't know if I mentioned this before, but seeing the book of Revelation as a book of decision. That, again, here, humanity has a decision. We have a decision. Humanity, really all the way through, again, that's a picture of the grace of God, is given a decision. Will you trust in the Lord? Will you have His name written on your forehead? Or it's really that comparison. Whose name are you going to choose? And at this point, it really gets very serious on whose name you're going to choose. So that's really, it's a choice for eternity, heaven or hell, the choice between creator and created. And the 14th chapter here bears this out, again, midpoint of the tribulation for our context and setting. So verses 1 through 5, let's look at those together. It says there, then I looked, and behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, like the roar of many waters, and like the sound of a loud thunder. The voice I heard was like the sound of harpists playing on their harps. And they were singing a new song before the throne, before the four living creatures, before the elders. No one could learn the song except for the 144,000 who have been redeemed from the earth. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. It is these who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been redeemed from mankind as first fruits for God and the Lamb. And in their mouth is no lie found, for they are blameless. So we have kind of two descriptive things, a group of people and a being. The Lamb is the being, so we'll look at the Lamb first. The Lamb, which is mentioned in verse 1 and 4, the Lamb is there, seen and standing on Mount Zion. Where is Mount Zion?
Right. In Jerusalem.
Jerusalem, Israel, right in the heart of God's nation, God's people's nation. And so this is kind of interesting, just even that wording, the Lamb standing on Mount Zion. The last reference to Jesus as the Lamb was actually chapter 7, verse 9, where there was a great multitude, every tribe, tongue, nation, language stood before the Lamb and the throne. And this multitude was a result of 144,000 Jewish witnesses who were pictured on earth as opposed to heaven. So again, John here sees the Lamb standing on Mount Zion. That's Mount Zion, just in reference, is one of four mountains that the city of Jerusalem is built on. There's four different mountains that Jerusalem is built on in the midst of. And the other ones are Moriah and Acra and Bethsaida. I don't know how to say that last one. The walls and the buildings of Jerusalem are built around and upon those mountains. The question is really, though, whether or not this is heavenly Mount Zion or earthly Mount Zion. It's referenced in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 22. This is where you might consider it to be heavenly Mount Zion. In heavenly Jerusalem, the location and time of John's vision kind of influences the understanding of the 144,000 that are gathered with him. So this seems to be, all the rest of the picture in chapter 14 seems to be a heavenly picture of the Lamb, so it seems to indicate towards a heavenly Mount Zion. But there's differing views and opinions on that, as with everything. One group says this and one group says that, and they reference different scriptures to support those things. Again, I don't think necessarily it's the details as much as it is the picture of who it is, who's the Lamb. We know that. What is he doing? Even who he's with, the 144,000, is something to try to figure out exactly. It's obviously his children. Which ones? That's up for debate. Those are the things, as you kind of think about this and work through it, you've got to try to figure out. I forget what else. There. Anybody have other thoughts on Mount Zion as you studied deeply on the topic?
I was just thinking about the 144,000, that they were Messianic Jews, right, that were preaching on the earth at some point.
Right.
And so now it looks like they're in heaven. So their mission has been completed as far as it goes, it looks like. And how did they get there? Were they raptured?
Those are great questions, Don. I think those are the right questions. Those are the debated questions. Who are they? We know who the Lamb is. Which Mount Zion is he on? Not sure exactly, but it seems to be, I would say, a heavenly type of picture, especially from what the other descriptions are talking about, but yet there's some earthly interaction with the reaping of the harvest that happens on the earth, but seems in comparison to. So Lamb and Mount Zion are that, 144,000. I would say also seem to be in heaven with the Lamb because of the description of who they're with, right? They're with the elders, the four creatures. We know they're in the throne room. So this Lamb is standing on Mount Zion, representation of heavenly Mount Zion. If it's the 144,000 who were protected on earth, then they're in heaven now. They must have option A, gathered before the throne following their martyrdom.
But that would assume they were all killed?
Right. Thought they were protected, right? Wouldn't that make option A not possible? They were protected, or are they protected for a purpose and a season, and then up in heaven through martyrdom or rapture? Or option B, gathered at the end of the tribulation at Mount Zion for the Messiah. Again, this is the challenging part of the way in which John writes and the way in which Revelation pops in and out of timeline. That construct is a little challenging to figure out. I don't know that I got a great answer for you as I looked and studied. 144,000 Jewish witnesses from the 12 tribes in chapter 7. But why are they now in heaven? Anybody else got insight and wisdom? Thoughts even? That might be shots in the dark.
Yes, it depends on when the rapture happens.
It kind of does, doesn't it?
You can kind of go either direction there.
Mm-hmm.
But they could have had a separate rapture from all the other multitudes.
Right, being caught up in their own they're particularly protected.
Mission or if they're martyrdom, they've all been martyred.
Because there's a change that happens right here at the midpoint where Satan is given all kinds of authority, even to the point of death at this point, over believers. And so, is he able to then find and destroy? Is the protection removed?
Boy, something that big I would have thought when it got mentioned.
Right? It is kind of a big
That's huge.
happening.
Yeah, after all, they devoted quite a bit of time to just two witnesses.
Yeah.
If you've watched, then you know the name. If you've watched the Tim LaHaye movies, read those books, Tim LaHaye feels, maybe you're like, well, I don't care what Tim LaHaye thinks, but here's what Tim LaHaye thinks, that they are part of the church and are distinct from the 144,000 Jewish witnesses. He sees two distinct groups of 144,000 in Revelation 7 and Revelation 14 based on their descriptions. The differences between 144,000 in chapter 7, which we've looked at, and 14 here can be accounted for by viewing the group in chapter 7 as the same group, with 144,000 in chapter 14 being martyred. That's one way to look at it, or two different 144,000s.
With two Mount Zions, that would it almost fits.
There are certainly uncertain things all throughout. Isn't that a good way to put it? Certainly uncertain things all throughout the book of Revelation. I had difficulty determining in my own mind who this 144,000 really are. And I didn't have time to go more in depth in my study to get further than that evaluation. I'm not sure who they are. In my mind, as I looked at Revelation and thought about it, this group has always been a singular group, not another separate 144,000 from the church, not of 144,000 protected Jews. But I thought they were protected. So that's why second group, okay, they're just of the church, and they're not protected, so they're killed. But 144,000 is a pretty specific thing. It seems to be related easily, especially in chapter 7, to the tribes of Israel. But again, okay, what lenses are you putting on to interpret this? If Israel and the church, tribulational, where in the tribulation your rapture view is, can really affect all of that. So, interpret it with your lens, or lenses. And again, the focus is not necessarily on 144,000, but who they're with, what they're doing, is a great picture for believers, all believers, whether it's Jews or Gentiles. What they're doing in description in these first 5 verses is they're singing. This is a picture again of the parade room. So they sang 144,000 singing, and this is the same picture you would see in the 149th Psalm. Somebody want to grab Psalm 149 real quick and just...
Psalm
149. I forget how many verses. It was just a synopsis picture.
It's the latter, or the last. Glasses, can't read it.
I can do it. Praise the Lord. Sing to the Lord a new song, his praise in the assembly of the saints. Let Israel rejoice in their Maker. Let the people of Zion be glad in their King. Let them praise his name with dancing and make music to him with tambourine and harp. For the Lord takes delight in his people. He crowns the humble with salvation. Let the saints rejoice in his honor and sing for joy on their beds. May the praise of God be in their mouths and a double-edged sword in their hands, to inflict vengeance on the nations and punishment on the peoples, to bind their kings with fetters, their nobles with shackles of iron, to carry out the sentence written against them. This is the glory of his saints. Praise the Lord.
So there's a song written way back, in the Old Testament that really lines up well with what the picture of the 144,000 singing. They're singing a new song. And that phrase is used a number of times throughout Scripture. It's mentioned actually 9 times in Scripture, new songs, and in each instance it reflects and points to God's grace, his glory, causes a new song within all who worship him. And so even within the Old Testament, they were recognizing, realizing more of who God was, and that created within them a new song. In eternity, we're going to be singing a new song because we're going to be fully exposed to the full glory of God. And that will be a song that we sing forever. Praise is going to be the activity of our eternity. And that's a pretty awesome thing. What's that song going to be? Well, in what the verses here say is, verse 2 talks about this song. It's loud, like thunder, like the roar of many waters. The voice is the sound of harpists, so they have good voices. They're melodic, and where they are at, and they're singing to God whose throne room they're in. And it goes on to say that the song is only understood by them. Like, if we heard it now, I think it sort of points to that John didn't even necessarily understand the song that they were singing, because it's a song for eternity that he's witnessing really there. So that's kind of an interesting thing. This distinct group, the first fruits of the redeemed of Israel, their description here is kind of interesting. Who were this group of 144,000? They're not defiled with women. Sorry, women, for that description, but they're pure. So I think a better general way to say that, wholly dedicated in bringing the lost to Christ. 144,000 who have a mission. Again, this is where I'm assuming this 144,000 is the same group, not a different group. If they are the same group as mentioned in chapter 7. And so this group, as described in this passage, they're virgins. And so that's kind of interesting that they have that kind of dedicated purpose. But you'll see Jeremiah in the Old Testament had a similar situation. He's not permitted to be married, so that he keeps himself wholly pure to the calling of God. It's not that marriage is defilement, as mentioned here, but this is a single-minded group that they are called and sent with a purpose, and not to concern themselves with marriage, anything else. They concern themselves in all that they do for that purpose.
Look at that last sentence there on that. They do not have time for those concerns. They come to Christ after the rapture, and the time ministry is short and to the point.
Mm-hmm.
But they had a mission to preach, right?
Right.
Was that after the rapture?
Yes. 144,000's mission.
Okay, right. So
If you take, I should say, if you take a pre-tribulational rapture view, that would be how that's written.
they come to Christ after the rapture.
Because they're Jews who come to know the Messiah and then have a purpose given to them after that, during the tribulation, to win the lost to Christ. And it's a short period of time to do so, and so they don't concern themselves with marriage. Rebecca?
So do you believe that the 144,000 are all men based on this? Or
Based on this,
who are-
it seems that they are. Yep. There's some debate about that as well, about everything. There is. But it seems to point to that they are. I'm just reading, because of the specificity of not defiled with women points to that it's men. The debate, I guess, would be that within the culture in which this is written, John's culture, there's a heavy male, dominant type of culture. So is it just written within that? I take scripture as literal unless it's otherwise. Some take it figurative unless it says it's literal. But it seems to point that these are men from again, if we're saying it's the single group that's mentioned in 7 and 14, this is from the tribes of Israel, and so it's 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes.
What kept them undefiled prior to the rapture, if this is...
That's a great question. I think God, in that God knows ahead of time who they are going to be, and even in that preparation, they're not believers, yet undefiled as in not married.
Right. But they were preparing themselves for something.
Yeah,
They knew they were preparing themselves for something.
yeah.
It wasn't, if you believe this is when the rapture took place, then they knew what they were saving themselves for by that.
Yeah, because obviously that doesn't make sense in our culture today, that 144,000 young men would remain pure, sexually pure, if they don't know Christ.
Yeah.
There's no reason to. Without Christ, what's the reason to? And so, in some sense, other than maybe some religious practice that they have that isn't in Christ but keeps them pure, then they find Christ and remain pure in following that. That's just kind of thoughts about it is that God does, and they have maybe some sort of personal practice or reason to as well. Okay, and they are without fault. Well, how could that be? These are sinless people. I don't think the point is that they're sinless. I think the point is the lives they lived after they came to Christ, which means before this, and I would say in a pre-rapture, before the rapture, and before their purpose, and before coming to Christ, obviously they weren't without fault. After that conversion, they lived exceptional lives, morally, all the ways for their purpose until their purpose is done. So this is an exemplary group of people would be looked to as, holy, righteous kind of group.
It's so strange to me to see the sentence that these are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes, which implies that Jesus is doing something and they're accompanying him. Is that too far off the reservation? They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. So,
Yeah.
to me,
Verse 4.
yeah, to me, it kind of drags me back to that thought, like, where is the rapture?
Yep. Following the Lamb wherever he goes.
Does Jesus himself, like prior to the seventh trumpet, which I mentioned before, when it says the kingdoms of this earth become the kingdoms of our God, and Jesus Christ personally reigns over that situation.
Mm-hmm.
So I can take that a little farther in my mind, thinking, well, he was reigning and doing things, and the 144,000 accompanied him.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I live. So.
Mm-hmm. That's where a number of viewpoints develop, I would say, from kind of that phraseology that's listed there, following the Lamb wherever he goes. Not he's following them wherever they go, right? Different way of saying it for sure. Or are they following him wherever he goes in heaven?
Depends on where you think he's at.
Right? Or is this just a descriptor of their earthly ministry while they were on earth and converted? They are followers of the Lamb.
What says they follow the Lamb?
Right.
So,
I follow the Lamb.
yeah.
Right? I'm a follower of Christ. And hopefully he's leading me. So I'm following him wherever he leads.
Yeah.
It's a different way it's a more modern way of saying what this says. Yeah. That's kind of how I read it for my own thinking as I do the application for me. I'm a Lamb follower. It's a weird way to say it, right? Follower of Jesus, but he's the Lamb. Capital L. So, yep. And it doesn't get any easier here in chapter 4 because there's a whole bunch of other angels that are going to be described as we kind of work through those. So this is obviously a redeemed group, and they're followers of the Lamb, and the Lamb is ruling. Well, the Lamb is always ruling. He's never not ruling. But they're without fault. They're living holy, righteous lives. So that's that opening group picture of the Lamb and the 144,000. And it kind of moves to a new picture in verse 6. So he's kind of, boom, here's a picture, boom, here's a picture, here's another one. He throws down this picture, verses 6 through 11, of 3 angels, and each one of them has a message. And it says, verses 6 through 11, and I saw another angel flying directly overhead with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, and language, and people. And he said with a loud voice, fear God, give him glory, because the hour of judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea, and the springs of water. And another angel, verse 8, a second followed, saying, Fallen is Babylon the great, she who made all the nations drink the wine, the passion of her sexual immorality. And another angel, verse 9, a third one followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and its image, receives a mark as holy on his hand, he will also drink the wine of God's wrath, pour full strength into the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, these worshippers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of its name. 3 angels, 3 messages. Good. My little thing out of order there. So we've got the first angel that's mentioned here. And actually, as we go through, we're going to find 6 angels referenced in this passage. So kind of interesting, all the players in this passage alone. The first angel is the one that speaks the everlasting gospel in verse number 6. He's flying directly overhead, and he's proclaiming to who? Who are these messages to? People of the earth. So there's a shift even in verses 1 through 5 from a heavenly picture to heavenly beings coming down to earth. But if you just take that literally, here these angels are proclaiming these messages to the earth by flying over it. They're like big megaphone angels. I don't know how else to kind of picture it in my mind. The first angel has this message of the everlasting gospel. What is that? The eternal gospel. Well, it's the gospel. So an angel flies around the earth so that all can hear the gospel. When? At the midpoint of the tribulation. So when they're hearing and seeing all the crazy destruction and Satan doing all his damage and all that, heavenly angels are, I don't know, seen or just heard. If it's just heard, that's even maybe weirder of not seeing but hearing. It's like over this megaphone, these messages, they hear the gospel. So the midst of heaven is where these angels come from. The good news is proclaimed by the first angel. So they get good news to start. The next 2 angels don't give them necessarily good news, but they give them truth. So all the angels proclaim truth. After hearing the gospel, they get the truth that the fall of Babylon is to come. He's warning of destruction in the future world, the capital where Satan is, that Babylon is going to fall. Don't trust in what is being seen and led by the beast, the image of the beast, all the things that we just saw down in the last chapter. Worship. They were deceived by all that. So in the midst of deception, God still says, hey, there's truth. Listen up. Here's the truth. The truth is that that's going to fall. What is Babylon? Babylon is really that reference for the great city from which Satan uses his authority on earth. Well, where is Babylon? Babylon is often a reference to Rome. That's one of the ways. Babylon is a reference to the rebuilt Rome. Babylon is also symbolic for sin, sinful humanity, sinful age. Satan is called King of Babylon in his rule, and he'll be judged as well. Some people think Babylon is a reference to the United States. I don't go there, but some do. So you got the fall of Babylon called out, spoken as truth by the angel, the second angel. And the third angel gives a warning for those who don't basically heed the first 2 messages. If you're not listening and you're going to listen to this other group, one final warning: don't take the mark of the beast, the one that is required for all the stuff. And if you don't get it, you're not going to, be able to buy or sell or do any of those things. He uses a couple of pretty concerning phrases about them. If anybody worships the beast, receives the mark on the forehead or the hand, he's going to, verse 10, drink the wine of God's wrath, pour full strength in the cup of his anger. The full strength of the wrath of God is what you will face if you do. You're going to be tormented with fire, sulfur. The smoke of the torment will last forever and ever, no rest, day or night. This is a description of hell. Is basically what he's giving is, if you receive this, you have made your choice. It is eternal, and it is terrible. There's not a lot of differing opinion on what's being described there. If you've ever gotten too close to a campfire, and the smoke, or if you've ever heard, say white rabbit or something to make the smoke go away, or there's all these tricks, right? But none of it works. Smoke out, the wind always ends up blowing the smoke in your face. Well, that sense of the worst fire smoke in your face is really this smoke of torment, is that you can't get away from it. You can't get away from the fire and the brimstone, the pain of being burned. The Bible is very descriptive to the realities of hell, and it's not something, right, we talk about hell on fire and brimstone preacher, when they preach about the realities of hell. Well, that's a little bit offensive to people. It doesn't make any less true. And the angel is even speaking that truth at this point as really, it's not necessarily the last resort, but it's the last decision time. This is decision time for humanity. And if you make the wrong decision, he's even saying, here's what's going to happen if you make this decision compared to the other. And yet, so many will still rebel and not listen. There will be no rest day or night. You ever not slept for a few days? How bad your body reacts to not having sleep? Again, 24 hours a day, forever, no rest from all of the described things before that. That's terrible. If you consider the realities of hell, there's not a person in this world, whether your best friend or your worst enemy, that you would ever wish the realities of that upon. And yet, I fail to tell people about Jesus. But if this is true, the mission should be very clear. And I shouldn't shy away from the realities of this, even in that sharing. Here's the good news, but can you really consider or believe or trust in the good news if you don't know the realities of the bad news? Right? A lot of times you need, maybe even first, there's bad news. There is sin, and the result of sin is death, and when you die and you don't know Jesus, you go to a place that's very real, it's hell, and here's the realities of those. But Jesus. That's really a way in which we're to speak truth, to win the lost. The angels are doing it here. They speak the truth, try to reveal all of that. So
This is right in the middle of the tribulation.
Yep. On earth. For all humanity to hear. At least that's what it seems to describe.
So the gospel keeps being preached all throughout this time, and apparently there's some that's still going to turn to Christ during this time.
Yeah. Right, because by description you'd say the 144,000 are out.
Yeah.
They're done sharing the message. God sends angels to share the message. After 144,000 are out. So still, again, there's 3.5 years left. But this is really decision time.
Yes, it's cutoff time.
Yep. There seems to be still chances, but they're smaller and smaller and more limited as you progress from this point forward.
I have one kind of question thought, I guess.
Yeah.
Matthew 24, 14 says that, and this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations, and then the end will come. And I've always put this in the context of it's our job to go out and spread the gospel around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you look at verse 6, chapter 14, they saw the angel having the everlasting gospel to do what? To preach to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like these two are connected because what is being said here is this is Jesus Christ himself saying, this gospel is going to be preached. Okay? So are we taking this out of context when we say it's, that this is our reason for evangelism? When in fact, there's going to be a heavenly experience of some sort with an angel who's going to, for the last time, this will be preached to every tongue, tribe, and nation. Just
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, 'cause-
are we taking that out of context?
It depends how you interpret Matthew 24,
Yeah.
right?
Well, that's how from my experience having been about with ministry, this was the one that said it's our job.
Yeah.
And and there's charts. You can look up a chart right now and it'll tell you what percentage of the earth's been,
Reached.
the gospel, and all we got to do now is get 59,000 other people on board, and we got our job done.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. It's going to happen.
I guess two ways one of the questions is, what is reached?
Well,
Is it saved, or is it that they've heard? Not that they've necessarily received.
yeah.
So that all have had opportunity to hear is what I would look at Matthew 24
I would agree.
with. So I think that can happen before this. Yeah, Matthew 24 is clearly tied to the book of Revelation and tied to eschatology, right?
Yeah.
So, I still, even Revelation spurs me on today to evangelize the lost before this moment comes, because I don't know how quickly this moment comes. Because of my uncertainty about some of the things in Revelation, whether pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, all of those things, makes me now say, okay, my purpose calling is now. This moment, I don't know how many moments I've got left. I know it's coming. Even to the end is the grace of God, but my calling is now to share this because of the realities of even then, whether I'm there or not. But I have looked at Matthew 24 until all I've heard is that all of that opportunity to hear, not necessarily believe, because all will believe.
I find it almost impossible to think that we as human beings can actually accomplish the task.
Yeah. Yet,
Well, we're given the Great Commission, right?
the modern, not revelation is the wrong word, modern thing that's happening, that's kind of interesting to that, is globally accessible internet, right? It's something that the Tesla guy is working on with the Starlink program. He's literally throwing out thousands upon thousands upon thousands of satellites with the purpose of getting free internet to the world. Right now it costs $99 a month for Starlink, just in case you want it. I've looked because I can't get internet at my house 3 miles from town, which is ridiculous. Come on. But I can't. The only internet I can get is Starlink. But it's something that he's working on to be globally accessible. Well, at that point, you have what's accessible on the internet, which includes the gospel. So that could be that the whole world then has opportunity.
Sure.
Now, you have to have a device in which to access the internet, and there's plenty of groups that don't have that. Yet you go to, crazy places in the middle of the jungles of South America or something, you're a little kid running around with a cell phone and no clothes on, right? It's like, what? How do you have a cell phone? I don't know what they do.
They're carrying torches.
Right. They've got torches now, they've got the word too. Now the word is running into the jungle with them. So that seems to be much more, that's one of those things that seems to be, okay, that all that opportunity to hear is now nearly there. They've narrowed it down as far as those groups who are still not accessible to any other. There's a couple of weird cannibalistic islands, right? If you go on, people die and get eaten. So, yeah, kind of interesting parallel or connection to Matthew 24. Even Revelation, or the Psalm 147, how integrally, again, Old Testament to New Testament to end times, the Psalms are even described in similarity.
People are getting, during this time, they're getting a real taste of hell on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And God is still saying, still got a chance here.
At midpoint in tribulation, there has already been an experience where people would definitely describe, what I would describe today as hell on earth. I haven't experienced anything as hell on earth yet. But what's happened already in the first 3.5 years has been, it's getting worse in those.
Well, I mean, how else, if you don't have their attention now, when are you going to?
Yep,
Because they're already going through incredible things.
yep,
And he's giving them one more chance. Here's the gospel again.
yep.
Here's a way of
So he does that.
escaping this, whatever.
Yep, he does that here. Then he goes into this quick drop of verses 12 and 13 for the saints. So for the sinners, for the lost, here's the gospel. For the saints, assurance. The sinners, lost, get what they need. The gospel, saints get what they need. The assurance of their faith. Here's the call for the endurance of the saints. Oh, we've heard that before. In fact, that exact phrase. It is woven throughout the book of Revelation for saints. Well, is this just the saints who are now in heaven around the throne? I think it's for them too, because the gospel is always good, the truth is always good for all who believe. But I think it's, let's just read it here. Here's a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, "Write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors and their deeds follow." Okay, so from now on, seems a particular phrase. This is directed towards living people who will believe in Christ in the tribulation at this point. Already lots of them have, that means more will. God's grace. And there's the assurance that they will find themselves with Christ. But there's also sort of a negative assurance. You're going to die. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Not just the ones, so they're in the Lord, that's their salvation. They're going to die. Ooh. So there's some reality to, again, the decision. This is about decision. You decide for Christ, you will die, but you will be blessed because you will rest from the labors in the Lord. So there's be patient, patiently endure. Blessed are those. Death is really just the entrance into the presence of God. So that's why it's a blessing, resting from all they've just experienced. Because if they get saved at this point, they've experienced the weight of the first 3.5 years. And if they get saved, they also are the ones who have not yet received the mark. They had made the decision here to do that. So what they do, even in decision for Christ and that kind of thing, their works will follow them. It's like they're going to be able to leave a legacy with others who haven't yet believed. That's the way I kind of look at that. They will also be rewarded in heaven.
So what are they doing? The ones that are come to accept Jesus at this time in mid-trib,
Yep.
and they don't die right away from the hands of Satan or whatever, right? Once he finds out, he kills him, does he not?
He does.
So what are they doing if are they ministering to one another? Are they trying to find ways of getting food and stuff outside of this beast system?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I think most of humanity, at least at this point, would be being tracked down, forced into. Here we are with the tattoo machine. Take it or not. No means death.
Either, the mark or the death.
Right. Or they're running hid, haven't been found in that way, forced for the mark, and prior to that, seeing all that's happening, hear the gospel, accept Christ. If they're found and don't have the mark and have Christ, reject the mark, it means death. The certainty of death is in the decision.
I think there's people that are going to be believers that are going to be around.
There's got to be some who survive, just like the unbelievers who run in the mountains and hide, and others who aren't found or drug in.
So in chapter 13, verse 9, it says, "If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity." he who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. So I do think that there's going to be saints running for the hills.
Yeah,
And I do think that there are going to be saints who are going to be taken captive.
right.
But I think either way, they're captive.
Yeah.
In my way of thinking. And so over here, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Of course, there's going to be some that are going to be killed for their faith. But I tend to, and the reason I say this is there's other places coming up later on where the saints are referenced again.
Mhm.
So even beyond this interlude between the seventh trumpet and the first bowl,
Yeah,
we're filling in the picture. And I think the picture, to me, kind of clearly indicates that the saints are going to be hanging around, but it's because when we get to this point in the tribulation, who knows, it's going to be every person for their own almost.
yeah,
Just,
yeah.
but
There is no right decision to be made at this point. There's no half in with Jesus
good point.
at this point. No more can you be an apathetic Christian. You're a dead or alive Christian.
And you might be a dead Christian who is alive.
Yeah. Yeah. Until found or
Death was your sting.
yeah.
So,
Okay, then it moves here last few verses, verse 14. There's a couple of reapings, a couple of harvests that happen. Verses 14 through 16, the reaping of the earth's harvest. Verse 14, then I looked, behold, a white cloud, him seated on the cloud, like Son of Man, with a golden crown on his head, sharp sickle in his hand. Another angel comes out of the temple, calling with a loud voice to him who sits on the cloud, put your sickle in and reap. For the hour to reap has come, for the harvest of the earth is fully ripe. So he who sat on the cloud swung his sickle across the earth, and the earth was reaped. Okay? There's this first harvest, the earth's harvest, that's described here. There's a white cloud. It's significant. The cloud is Old and New Testament. The first appearance of a cloud in Scripture follows Noah's flood. God uses the rainbow in a cloud as a sign of his covenant to the earth, sign to never flood the earth again. This white cloud has the Son of Man sitting on it. We know who this is. So this is used 82 times in the New Testament for the Messiah. The first occurrence in the Messianic context is Daniel chapter 7, talking about this Son of Man. What's different about this picture, we've seen, a person in the throne room with similar descriptions, is what he's got in his hand, right? Is the sickle. It's changed a little bit into what are sickles for? Cutting things down. Harvested, then thrown into the fire. Those were kind of the option. The Son of Man waiting for the right time to harvest the field of the earth. Satan is separating the wheat from the tares. That's a great picture we see in description earlier in the New Testament, wheat and tares. He's forcing them to make a choice for eternity on the thread of death. Weeds and tares are being identified. Jesus is about to harvest the souls from the Great Tribulation as they choose death and Christ rather than worshiping the beast. This is actually a good harvest. This is the people who are going to choose Christ are going to die, but they are being reaped by God himself, by the Son of Man, into heaven. This is not a bad reaping. This is a good reaping. So it's kind of, as you think about reaping, often you think of the Grim Reaper, right? You got the big sickle sort of thing. It's sort of a picture, but the first reaping is the earth's harvest is one for God. And the second one is not so good. Another angel, John watches another angel comes out of heaven. The angel cries with a loud voice to the Son of Man, to Jesus, and says, it's time. It's like, oh, this is the clock, this is the angel with the watch. Okay, Jesus, it's time now. Oh, kind of interesting. Doesn't Jesus know the time? Obviously he does. He's not ordering this, but he's announcing this. That's the thing. He's not telling the Son of Man what to do. He's just announcing. He's like ringing the bell tower. It's time. So this thrusting in the sickle to reap. Again, this is knowing that the time is now changed. To choosing Christ means choosing death, and the time is now for that. Because of mankind's state, because of Satan's power, control, and authority in what he's doing, this rightness is that times have changed right here at this point.
So what is that? Is that almost like another rapture?
Right.
He harvests the believers, right? This is the last harvest of the believers.
Right. I look at this more as it's weird because the harvest and the sickle are the idea here, but I have more picture this is the arms of God bringing in His fold, more like the shepherd bringing in the sheep. The next one's a very different description of a harvest being reaped, being squished and crushed, and none of that is what's described here, the first harvest. So I wouldn't see it as a rapture, though maybe some mid-tribbers might. Good question, good thought. I think what's true is there's going to be a lot of death at this point, but only those who believe will be reaped into, harvested into heaven by the Son of Man. The other ones will be reaped into harvest for judgment, which is what 17 through 20 really talk about. And finish out the chapter here. Another angel comes out of the temple in heaven. He too has a sharp sickle. And another angel comes out from the altar. So there's two angels, which are not the Son of Man. This is different. So these are angelic beings. One of them has a sickle, just like the Son of Man who has a sickle. That's why the sickles are different in that sense. They're very different pictures. And this other one comes from the altar, who has authority over fire, calling with a loud voice to the one who has the sickle. So you guys are talking to each other. He says, "Put your sickle in, gather the clusters from the vine of the earth, for its grapes are ripe." So the angel swung his sickle across the earth, gathered the grape harvest of the earth, and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. The winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the winepress as high as the horse's bridle for 1,600 stadia. This one's not a good picture. It's kind of gross, actually, if you really think about what's being described. Fifth and sixth angels here described in chapter 14. What a powerful role angels are playing in all of this. I mean, that's just a part of it. This one comes from the altar. This one the sixth angel, where he comes from, could be the one referenced in Revelation 8, verse 5, the one with who took the fire from the altar and filled the censer with it. Maybe this is the fire angel. It's just sort of maybe this is an angel who's already been referenced. He's just coming and kind of again heralding the other angel about what's going to happen. This power over fire is something used 25 times. Fire is used to judge, to purify, to enact the wrath of God. That's what's happening here. The great winepress of the wrath of God is a pretty powerful statement there. The earth is going to be judged by God Himself in His wrath. The instrument of judgment is going to be Israel. In the end, it seems as Israel as a nation will be like light to a bug. It's going to be drawn to the light in the sense that it's drawn to make war against it. Israel as a nation is going to stand strong and have already, right, to this point. They've endured. Zechariah describes this as supernatural kind of power. But the wine press itself was the wine press. This is something people in Johnstown would know much about. It's a thing that they did in practice, putting in They carved out these things in stone, and they would pour all the bricks into one big pool, and then people would run around and stomp on them until they're pressed out, right? And as they're pressed out, the juice flows down into a vat through a channel. This is the idea that the grapes are people, and the wrath of God is being weighted down upon them in death. They're going to face some severe things. Now, the means by which they die is all different sorts of means. Much of it is by the power in the hands of Satan and his armies. But this is the wine press, something in Israel, ancient Israel especially, they would understand, get the context of what John's saying. This is another descriptor here used. This is just a picture that kind of gives us a thought about what's being said, the depth of what's going to happen, and this is, again, greater described in the Battle of Armageddon. Again, about I would say the literal amount of blood that flows from those who come against God, and he wipes them out in a single, motion or a word spoken from his lips. It's a gross picture. We looked at the winepress outside the city. So the city is Jerusalem, the great city. And so that the nations come and they gather against God, they gather against his people. Jerusalem is this central city in all of these happenings, right? The beast centers his power there in Jerusalem. So they gather there, the hatreds of the Jews by the kings of the earth. It's going to be, even more so demonic possession. These kings demonically possessed lead the armies of the earth all to one location to fight against God and his people. And there they will be reaped. The blood, the massive humanity led by Satan here. Zechariah describes this same coming judgment as well. The return of Christ will dissolve all of those who come against him, dissolve, and their blood will flow. This describes how many people are still alive, how many are coming against him, taking the mark of the beast, to great description, right? To the height of the horse's bridle, which is approximately what is that? Just a second, I wrote it in my notes so I don't remember. I was going to say it's like 4.92 feet, just under 5 feet is the height of the horse's bridle. And then 1,600 furlongs or 1,600 stadia is approximately 181 miles. This is approximately the length of Israel from north to south, and blood will flow as the armies of the earth come against Christ in this time. It's just there's my note, 1.5 meters. So there's a huge battle being described here, and it just gets worse. So it's just a crazy response, again, to hearing the gospel worldwide, and then this happening. Here's sort of a full picture of all Revelation 14, all the things that we've talked about. Questions, thoughts? Trying to get all of these kind of things, one whole chapter in, it's quite an endeavor. So if you, as we go through these, have more questions, write them down and bring them back. And I love to dig more into them as well, because I don't want us to have all the answers on the spot. If you feel overwhelmed, join the club, because I do too at times. Yet there's still a simplistic, personal thing for each of us in this. There's a blessing promised in just reading it. There's a purpose in it for each one of us here and now. I really believe that. And so, and there's hope. There's hope because of whose you are. If you're His, no matter how this all falls out, you know the eternal reward for those who believe in His name. Right? For those who are called by His name. Next chapter is the prelude to the bowl judgments. So now we don't even get into them, they just start coming. And then they come, starting in chapter 16. So they're sort of this, it's like, we've been talking about these bowl judgments are going to come. They are, and really there's not a lot of, as far as what's happening, doesn't seem to be, there's a huge time frame difference from the blowing of the seventh trumpet and this dumping out of the bowls, but there is a lot happening. Globally, all these things in heaven and on earth, all of this happening. So again, what a crazy thing that John is experiencing and seeing and trying to communicate and all of that. So, whoa, just whoa. I've gone through it so many times and still just awed by what I read. Okay, that's chapter 14. Whew. We do have some pictures if you'd like to draw. I know you guys love to draw. It's your favorite. It's why you come. There's actually 5 pictures, so we need a little bit of help. Lynn cannot draw all pictures. Okay, that's she needs a little help. So stop and draw a picture or two. And read ahead. Sometimes it's good. Next week is just a shorter chapter, 8 verses. Read ahead, get your thoughts into that, and come with questions. That'd be awesome. Okay, thanks everybody.